Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular October meeting of the Concord Zoning Board of Adjustment. We will follow our usual procedure this evening, which is to say we'll take the cases in the order in which they appear in the agenda. We will ask the appellants to come forward, be sworn in, and have a seat in the chairs to my right. And we will ask them to offer any information that they would like us to have by way of educating us about why they believe their zoning variance or special exception should be granted. Following that, we'll ask the appellants to step down, and we'll solicit testimony first from people in the audience who are in favor of the appeal, and second from people in the audience who are in opposition to it. Following all of that, we will check in with code enforcement to see if there's any information from their office that's relevant to the case. And then, if information has been offered that appears to require factual clarification, the appellant will have the opportunity to offer that clarification before we close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Under most circumstances, the board will consider the case and act on it before moving on to the next one. We do ask that the appellants confine their testimony, if at all possible, to 10 minutes, and that those who are both in favor and in opposition confine their testimony to 5 minutes. We have an unusually long agenda this evening, so I think you will find that brevity and staying on the point will help win the hearts and minds of the members of the zoning board. The first case this evening is case 2817, Elizabeth and Sean Muller. The applicant wishes to remove a 12-foot by 21-foot garage and replace it with a 16-foot by 46-foot two-story addition with garage workshop on the first floor and living space on the second, and requests a variance to the table of dimensional regulations to permit a 10-foot side yard setback where a 15-foot side back is required for property at 4 Moorland Avenue in an RS residential single-family district. Is either Elizabeth or Sean Muller here to speak? Please come forward. Not up here.
Want us far away or close?
Oh, right there, usually. Chris, that's yours with a letter.
Okay.
You can pass those down.
May I swear you in? Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Yes. Please have a seat and identify yourselves for the record as you testify.
Do you have any other paperwork?
Hello, I am Elizabeth Mueller, and this is...
Sean Mueller.
I apologize for mispronouncing your name.
That's
No
okay.
worries.
We're both teachers. We're used to it a lot.
We have read your application, but for the benefit of those here who have not, and for our TV audience at home who are all glued to their sets, would you fill us in on the high points of why you feel the variance is justified?
Sure. We live at 4 Moorland Ave. It's a small 1950s ranch with an unfinished basement. We currently have 3 bedrooms and 1 bath. We absolutely love our neighborhood, and we've lived there for nearly 18 years. We have 3 children who are rapidly approaching their teenage years, and we would like to add an additional bathroom and bedroom to the house. We fully intend to maintain the charm and of the neighborhood and keep our renovation of our home in the character of our neighborhood. Our proposal is to remove our existing... Wow, that's a weird picture. I do have more updated pictures. There's 2 copies.
It's Google. It may be a couple years old.
Yeah, we no longer have any of those trees.
It's super smushed.
There's 2 of them if we want to. Great, thank you.
It's the same picture. There's just 2 copies.
Do you have an aerial shot?
So there's 2 photos of our the actual appearance of the front of the house, because that is like super smushed in there. Our proposal is to remove the existing garage, which is 21 feet long and 12 feet wide, and to replace that with a small 2-story addition, which would be 46 feet long and 16 feet wide. That would include a garage and small workshop on the first level with a bedroom and bath on the second floor. The current garage is 14 feet from the property boundary, which does not meet the required setback of 15 feet. Our new proposed space would be 10 feet from the property line. And the reason that we're asking for this is we'd like to keep the single-car garage, but still allow for a stairwell up to the second floor. The adjacent home, number 2 Moreland Ave, sits 21 feet off the property boundary. So we feel that with the 21 feet plus our 10 feet would still follow the intent of the 15-foot setback on both sides and is still have a gap greater than 30 feet.
And we have 2 additional letters from neighbors, too.
All right, if you have letters, would you pass them along, please? Thank you. Questions from the board? Nick, any questions? Jim?
So you're adding, you'll maintain the garage, but you're going to add a living level above the garage, is that?
Yes, that's our intent. We originally looked at putting an additional bedroom on the other side of the house. Looking at the map up here, we sit on the corner of Moreland and Midland, and our bedrooms are all on the Midland side. So our original plan was to try and add a bedroom over a 4th bedroom on the bedroom side, but unfortunately that would mean removing a bedroom to add a bedroom or removing the bathroom to add a bedroom, which seemed rather counterproductive pretty quickly. Just with the floor plan, we didn't have many options with that.
Well, you will be removing the existing garage, correct, and replacing the whole thing?
Yes.
Yeah, so
And the new addition is how wide?
16?
We're hoping for
6 by
16 feet.
16.
So that would mean that the addition would go back as far as the 3-season porch in the backside.
Right.
And it would come as far forward as the front of the house.
So you'd be going towards that property line 4 additional feet, is that correct?
Yes.
To the right?
And in this photograph, your house is the one with the van parked in front of the garage door?
Yes.
So it's a corner lot, so it's unique in that way.
Okay. Any questions? Rob?
I'm good, thank you.
At present, how much square feet of living space do you have roughly?
Just over 1,000.
And how much will you be adding on just the living space of this addition, roughly?
700.
Is that bringing it up that much? Is that consistent with the other houses? Or will that make you one of the biggest houses in that area or for living space, or will it be about even?
So our neighbor across the street has a fairly big addition towards the back side of his house, so you can see, because his house originally was our size.
You mean
Number
across the
3.
street on Moreland there, or 6? Or?
Number 3.
Right here.
Oh, okay.
And then this is like a 2-story split ranch style house. This is a cape. It's going to be larger than this house here, because this is the original style like ours. This is fairly large compared to ours. So ours is one of the smaller ones in this area right in here.
So it'll the size of it will be consistent.
Yeah, we believe so. Yeah.
Anything else you'd like us to know?
If
Thank you
have
very
other
much.
questions.
Thank you.
That's it? So we
Yep,
step down?
Yep. If you would step down. Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? I do have some letters here. I have a letter from Lori and Wade Warner, who are at 3 Moreland Avenue. We are neighbors of Elizabeth and Sean Mueller and have no objection to their proposed garage removal and 2-story addition. We have a letter from William Faulkner at 1 Moreland Avenue. I write to support the appeal of Elizabeth and Sean Mueller. The Muellers, both parents and their 3 children, are the heart and soul of this neighborhood. They've raised their family here. The children, now being in Concord High and St. John's, lived amicably in this house for 15+ years and been a constant source of assistance to others. Sounds good. As you likely know, there is no buildable lot between their current garage and the garage in the adjacent property at 2 Moreland Avenue. In my opinion, no one will be inconvenienced when you approve of their appeal. To the contrary, and so on. And then there is a letter here. It looks like a printed email from Jill Whitmore. The Whitmores, 4 Midland Street, abutters to 4 Moreland Street, have no concerns about the addition the Muellers are planning on building. Any comments from code enforcement?
Nothing to add at this point.
I had a quick question for Craig. So across the street is 3 Moreland?
Mm-hmm.
Looks like that property doesn't meet the setback requirements either. Do we know if they've recently been here, or is it grandfathered, or you don't know?
Well, now this has been brought up, I was just wondering the same thing. And I seem to recollect that they may have been before the board at some point in time, but I'd have to look it up to make sure of that.
With that, I'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed.
3.
We have a request for the removal of an existing garage and the construction of a new 2-story addition, which would include a garage. In its place, the addition would be about 4 feet wider, I believe, than the existing garage, and would require a variance from the setback restrictions. Discussion?
I'm ready to move approval.
All right. Want to make that motion?
I move that we approve the request.
Would you give us the benefit of your rationale?
Yeah, I think the addition is an improvement to the property in the neighborhood. The uniqueness of the lot, I think, creates along with other issues, creates a necessity to do the addition on the side of the house where they proposed it. The neighbors seem comfortable in support of the change, and I think it's in keeping with the nature of the neighborhood.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. Our next case this evening is case 2917, Kelly J. Smith. The applicant wishes to build an enclosed 16-foot by 8-foot front entry and requests a variance to the table of dimensional regulations to permit a 12-foot plus or minus setback from the front property to the closest corner of the addition, where a 15-foot setback is required for property located at 4 Thomas Street in an RH residential high-density district. Is Kelly Smith here? Please come forward. Better tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Absolutely.
Would you give us your name for the record as you testify, please?
My name is Kelly Smith, and I reside at 4 Thomas Street, which is a small, short road, dead-end street on the Heights in Concord. My house is diagonally located across the street from the Hazen Drive, Loudon Road intersection. And I have my late husband and I, it's the tan-colored one there, but it's mossy aura now. My late husband and I purchased it in 1998, and we made a lot of nice aesthetic improvements to it. But the one thing that hasn't happened is that front entryway, which the wind blows across that intersection and comes right square into that front entryway, which is my living room. So in the wintertime, I get to shovel snow outside and inside the house. Rain is always a problem too. Having a little, issue with rain in there as well, water. And it's starting to corrode all that old wrought iron stuff and the prefab steps. So I decided to take and I'd like to make a 3-season porch on the front of it where I can have a little bit of a barrier to block the wind from coming into the actual house itself and the elements, and to get a little bit of enjoyment out of it as I continue to get older. So I've talked to a contractor. We are hoping to put a 4-foot frost wall in with some vents. We're going to put in vapor barrier with extra insulation both in the base of the porch, we're using 2x12, I might be wrong on this, 2x12 floor joists, and having extra insulation in that, extra insulation in the walls, low-E windows, low-E door, moving the front door so it faces more towards the Marquez family's home, which is the 2 Thomas Street home, and eliminating the front walkway, so there'll be a side walkway that goes out to the driveway. And basically, just trying to add a little extra space. I believe it's like 128 square feet that I'll be adding to my Taj Mahal, my 970 square foot house thereabouts. And just improving the looks of the front of the building and improving its functionality.
Craig, can you give us a overhead view of the immediate region there?
So just to orient you, that's the Dunkin' Donuts, Loudon Road.
Okay.
That's that, currently a 2-family home there. So this would be the applicant's home at this point here.
Okay.
Oh, I see, that's that dead-end street, yeah.
Yeah, the intersection of Loudon Road and Hazen Drive's right here. Thomas Street would have come out at one point in time, but it was discontinued. This is city-owned land at this point here.
Can you zoom in a little? Thanks. Not that far. That's good, thanks.
What you'll also notice is that the city of Concord owns quite a bit of the front lawn, which I've been mowing for you guys, by the way.
You should get an abatement on your taxes.
I should.
It is
I've been taking
appreciated.
care of it since 1998. But the problem is that where the 16x8 porch is going to be, the corner that's closest to the LaFave's home, which is the 6 Thomas Street home, the corner of the porch where it comes out barely encroaches the 15-foot setback. So there's still like 14 more feet till the street.
So it's really how the lot kind of runs on an angle.
Yeah, it is.
Questions from the board? Okay.
No, I'm just trying to this is a Craig question, I guess, more than, so is this unusual that the city owns that 3 or 4 feet between
14
the street
feet.
and the property line?
Well, yeah, depending on the width of the right-of-way, the right-of-ways are usually around 50 feet, which I'm guessing this probably is. Oops. Yeah, it's pretty much a standard width right-of-way, but the street width itself may vary. So this looks like, I think this is a little narrower than a usual street, so you have a little more green space there between the property line and the edge of the street. Oftentimes you could have a sidewalk in that area too.
And then I guess because of the angle of the property line, it looks to me that about 2/3 of the addition is going to be within the setback. It's only a portion of it that's...
Yes, that's
Yeah, it's only
correct. So
according to the
a couple
sketch.
feet.
Yep.
Any questions, Rob?
I'm good, thank you.
Andrew? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? In opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
Just, it's unlikely that the city is ever going to change the configuration of Thomas Street or widen it, considering where it's located, and it's pretty much a dead-end area at that point, so.
Very good. With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have a request to replace an existing front entry with a new, somewhat larger piece of construction. We heard testimony that the existing front entry is not in good shape and needs to be replaced to keep the snow out of the living room. And we have a request that the corner of the addition be permitted to be in the front yard setback. Discussion?
Well, I think obviously the hardship is based on the fact that the house is laid out at an angle, and I'm inclined to support it based on the fact that I think it would do substantial justice to allow this addition. There's minimal impact into the setback, so I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. Case 3017, Warren Street Architects. The applicant wishes to build a 22-foot by 12-foot addition onto the south rear side of an existing building and requests a variance to the table of dimensional regulations to permit a 2-foot 9-inch setback from the rear property line to the closest point of the addition, where a 15-foot rear setback is required, and a 10-foot side setback on the west side, and a 10-foot side setback on the west side, and a 7-foot 10-inch side setback on the east side, where a 15-foot side setbacks are required, for property at 27 Warren Street in a CVP Civic Performance District. Gentlemen, you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify, please?
Good evening. I'm Ari Pollack. I'm an attorney with Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell here on Main Street. I'm here tonight for the applicant, Warren Street Architects, and to my left is Jonathan Holly, who is a principal at Warren Street. The request relates to Warren Street's existing professional offices at 27 Warren Street. The firm operates an architectural practice at the subject site where they've called home for 10 years. The proposal is to expand the existing office building with a new 2-story addition to the rear of the existing building that would measure approximately 12 by 22. The addition would add about 260 square feet to the overall footprint, which measures just under 1,700 square feet. And if we put it in percentages, the proposal is to add about 15% to the building footprint with the rear bump out. The current structure is non-conforming. The lot is all of 3,600 square feet, or 0.083 acres, very small tract. The existing building already occupies portions of the front, side, and rear setbacks and has done so without any significant issue. On the sides, the portions of the existing structure extend closer to the boundaries presently than what is proposed in the rear. The proposal seeks a variance to increase these nonconformities, and the increase, however, is relatively minor in comparison to the existing condition, and it also relates to what would be an expansion of a permitted use in the Civic Performance District. The expansion is also entirely consistent with the way in which the neighborhood has evolved over the years. For example, most, if not all, of the surrounding lots are non-conforming in any number of dimensional respects. Setbacks are encroached upon, driveways are shared, off-street parking is very limited, except for a few instances where off-street surface parking is the predominant use of the lot, which is occurring directly to our east. And lot coverage is considerable on these properties. And so simply put, the neighborhood is a collection of smaller lots, and each of the lots are loaded up with improvements. If the variance was granted, it would enable a successful Concord-based professional firm to grow and expand in place and to stay local. The inability to expand would cause the firm to have to explore other options, which could certainly lead to relocating around or outside of Concord, or to divide its team amongst multiple locations, which is certainly not their preferred option. And so denying the variance, denying the variance would interfere with the reasonable use of the property, because professional office space is recognized in this district as a permitted use. The improvements are already non-conforming. Surrounding lots are likewise heavily developed, and nonconformity is commonplace in this portion of the city. Again, Warren Street is a valued local business that wants to stay where they are, right in the middle of Concord. No fair and substantial relationship exists between the purposes of the ordinance and the specific restriction, because most, if not all, of the properties in the neighborhood are heavily developed and likewise non-conforming. For example, the rear abutting property is improved to within inches of the shared boundary. This is the property to our south. And even this extreme example has proven workable over the years. There's nothing a good fence can't fix. Granting the variance is not contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, frankly, because this neighborhood and this district is transitional between the urban streetscape of the Main Street area and the more residential neighborhoods that sprawl to the north of Green Street and up the hill. Also, the district features an adequate supply of daytime municipal garage parking and other on-street parking options to assist businesses, and of course, the architectural firm is a daytime user. The variance is not contrary to the public interest because it would help a business continue to remain in Concord and grow in our downtown, and it would allow improvements that are consistent with the scale and the massing of the abutting neighbors' properties and their improvements. In short, they're doing the same thing that the others around them have done. Substantial justice would come from allowing a long-time Concord business, again, to stay where they are and put a modest expansion on a use that they are already operating. And lastly, the variance wouldn't diminish surrounding property values because the level of development that exists and is proposed is commonplace in this part of town. And if anything, the additional investment in expanding and improving the structure would increase the value of the subject property and could well serve as a model for converting other residential improvements to business opportunities, where again they would be permitted uses in this district. Warren Street, proactively as the applicant, has sought conversation with its abutters regarding the proposed application and the improvements. Most of the feedback, not all, most of the feedback has been positive. You're going to hear from some of these neighbors this evening. In addition to the testimony you received tonight, our abutter to the east, Woodbury Court, they own 25 Warren Street. They've supplied a letter of support for the application. And likewise, the YMCA, which is our abutter across Warren Street, has also supplied a letter of support for the application. And I certainly have copies of each letter if they didn't make it into your packet, or if additional copies would be helpful. I'll pass them around. And meanwhile, Jonathan and I are here to take any questions you have, and otherwise we appreciate your consideration.
We do have copies of the letters.
Okay, thank you.
Questions from the board? Nick, any questions? Jim?
I'm good, thank you.
Andrew?
Where do you guys park now?
We have a couple of spaces to the rear of the building. Those spaces would be eliminated with the proposed expansion, and we actually rent some off-site spaces from the lot next door.
So you'd have to rent basically all your parking if you do this?
We presently put 4 to 5 cars in the driveway that we share with the property to the west. And we rent space from the corner lot from INEX, who owns that. We're not expanding staff. We're on top of each other, and we're trying to give everybody reasonable room, you know, a cubicle, if you will, individually. That's all that we're trying to do. I'm not.
This wouldn't take away any of your parking? Okay.
You own the building, I presume?
Yes.
And
yeah.
how long you been there?
10 years. Yep. I
How'd you come up with such a clever name for the...
That's why I can't move.
You really boxed yourself in that time.
I do have, which I've shared with all of the neighbors, proposed elevations of the building and what the addition would look like. I don't know if it's in the spirit of sharing it with.
Sure,
I can
pass it over. I think
around.
that's, if there's relevant information, we might as well see it.
Is this multiple values?
There's existing elevations and proposed elevations. The ridge height matches the existing. Essentially what we're doing is proposing basically a 12-foot addition off the back. And there's a portion of the rear of the building that we would.
These all the same?
Yep. Yep.
So If you will, if you look at the existing elevation, the back 30 feet is basically, we're in the eave and there are dormers, so people are under a sloped roof condition. We would take that portion of the roof off and build it up. So we're basically proposing what would be a mansard roof that surrounds it. The height of the roof being the same height as the existing ridge line. So other than the fact that it will look a little boxier, it essentially is very consistent with what it looks like today. I do expect that a condition of moving forward, if this is granted, that we would look to having that rear wall perhaps, you know, fire rated in some way, and that's more of an issue for the planning board when we get, if we get to that point.
Questions from the board?
What's the hours of operation?
We're basically an 8 to 8. I mean, most of us go home at 5, 6 o'clock, but on occasion we're there till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. But we open at 8 in the morning, and I try to work 5 days a week, and we're pretty consistent with that. So I think you'll hear from the neighbors to the west that are here tonight that it's not very often that we're here on the weekends.
And if you need additional parking, that lot that comes out on right North State Street, that's...
We do have several staff that park off-site, that park a couple of blocks up, that just choose not to pay for parking.
Gotcha.
But we do have an arrangement with INEX, who owns the parking lot. We rent spaces from them now. They've offered us additional spaces so that there's capacity for parking should we need it. Again, I'm not looking to add staff. We're 12 people. We've been 12 people for a long time. It's just that we're on top of each other. And one of the constraints in terms of, I have looked all across Concord for space. I can't find space. One of the restrictions is that my staff wants to all be on the same floor. So when you come into our office, we have conference space and we have admin on the first floor, and there are 10 of us on the second floor, which is under that eave. And I mean, I can scratch a staff member's back by turning around. So we're just trying to, you know, move that off, and by adding 12 feet, it will allow us to literally develop cubicles on that second floor, so everybody can have an 8x8 cubicle with a half wall and have some containment in their workspace.
The plan references the demolition of a shed.
There's a small patio in the back that is impervious. It has a decking on it. When we moved into the building, we've had a 10x10 shed with a garage door on it in the back. It's basically sitting on cinder blocks. We use it for storage of paper and files and folders. It's been there since we moved in 10 years ago. There is a 6-foot stockade fence that wraps both the east side and the south side of the property, and then continues with a 6-foot vinyl fence on the property to the west of us. So the property, the shed would come out, and
So the shed is kind of encroaches presently?
the shed does encroach,
yeah.
yes. Yep. The entire house is within all 4 setbacks.
Yeah, okay.
As it exists today.
Other questions from the board?
So according to this plan, you basically, once you do the demolition of the patio and the shed, you're getting closer to the property line by 2 to 3 feet, is that correct?
It's roughly 2'9" or not,
Yeah,
3 feet.
Right, we're doing
Yep.
3 feet 9 inches off the rear line. as
Gotcha.
proposed.
We would maintain that stockade fence. We'd actually replace it with a vinyl fence to match the property to our west, so it's all contiguous. And the building would come up, basically there'd be a fence which is on the property line, and then our building would set back 3 feet.
Any questions, Andrew?
No more.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to be in favor of this appeal? Please come forward. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Would you identify yourself for the record as you testify, please?
My name is Sharon Gale, and I live at 29 Warren Street, the property which is to the west of Warren Street Architects. We have been in our house 17 years. There are three of us that own the property, Maureen Richards, Kathleen Lanigan, and myself. And we're in favor of this because Warren Street Architects have been a wonderful neighbor. They are there Monday through Friday. They park, with the exception of one person who parks a little crooked in the driveway. The rest of the employees park correctly. They're courteous. If we need to get out and our space is blocked, they will move it. They'll move their cars. And I would hate to have them leave that facility and go someplace else, because we have no idea who's then going to come into the neighborhood and take over this house, which they've maintained now for 10 years. So we are definitely in favor, even with the fact that construction is going to go on in our shared driveway, because we do share a driveway. We would rather have them as neighbors than lose them. So we are definitely in favor of them and this variance.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard in favor? Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in opposition? Good evening. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Would you identify yourselves as you testify for the record, please?
Sure. I'm Karen Maynard.
I'm Jeff Marsh.
And I'm James Raymond from Upton and Hatfield. Karen with a C and Jeffrey own the property behind the applicant's property. Their address is 8 Blake Street. As was described, this is a neighborhood of pre-existing non-conforming uses, buildings built in the 1800s. Many are close to the lot line. I have to point out that does not exempt properties from complying with zoning going forward, though. I think you have to look at this application for its impact as a change in the property, not in relation to existing encroachments. We'd like to proceed that Karen has some photographs. I'm going to have her pass out with the chair's consent to walk through to show, I guess, Jeffrey, to show the neighborhood and the impact on it, because I think that's an important factor here. While he's doing that, I just have a few questions for the board to consider when they look at it. One is, what special conditions does this property have compared to other lots? It's a small lot, but so are others with encroachments, pre-existing condition, but that's necessary in order to find unnecessary hardship. Will the granting the variance change the nature of the neighborhood? And I think Karen's description will show how it will. Will it cause a diminution in value of their property? Karen will describe how many years experience on doing residential rental property.
In Concord, about 30 years.
That she's had extensive experience and has an opinion on that. And will it conflict with the ordinance's zoning objectives, which includes maintaining buffers, open space, setbacks? But I'd like to have Karen walk through her photographs first, so you get a picture of the neighborhood.
I just wanted to provide you with the map at first, just showing the whole block. Now, if you go to photo 1, you can see from State Street looking down towards the Warren Street building, that those first 3 houses on the left are right on the property line. I agree, they're non-conforming, they're right there. But they do not have any kind of structure blocking their view. They have a parking lot. If you go to picture number 2, we just moved in a little closer, and we're looking at the side of the shed, and this is the little courtyard that belongs to 27 Warren Street, and it also shows the little backyard for 29 Warren Street, but it shows the back of the other houses as well. If you go to photo number 3 from our upstairs of our house, we overlook the parking lot, and this is the courtyard that will be removed if he puts in this addition. So there's a tree, the umbrella that you see there. The building will be right there. So if you look at picture number 4, the same upstairs from my house, looking to the left, every yard from my house to State Street abuts the parking lot. No structure blocking their view. If you look to the left, every house has a backyard, a patio, a courtyard. So there are no buildings that are 2 feet 9 inches set back from another building. Everybody's got 15 feet or so. There's room. There's, and that's outdoor space that everybody uses. A little bit of greenery, a nice patio. You know how hot it is downtown when you get out of work and you want to go home. It's cooler out there when you have some greenery. If I have a building that is 2 feet from my building, it's going to be hot. I'm looking at a wall. And this is my home. It's not my business. I'm not complaining that his business is loud. It isn't. He's been a nice neighbor. But I don't want to, if you look at photo number 5, you can see that there's trees and people get to enjoy their yard. If you look at photo 6, that's the view as it is now, and the setback's about 15 feet. But now bring that to 2 feet 9 inches, and I'm going to be looking at a wall. My porch is going to be lack of view, lack of air. It reduces my livability.
And the fence in this picture, too, is already
Right
12 to 14 inches or better into his property. So the fence is not on the line, it's actually into his property a little bit.
Photo 7 shows my patio, so that where that tree is, that's going to be a wall. Really going to change the flavor of the neighborhood because it will be the only building that is that close to a property line where it affects other houses, where it makes the houses close together.
What about 4 and 6? They look pretty close together.
4?
On Blake.
That's a parking lot, and that's shadow.
No, the house on
Right, but the houses are up to the property line.
Setback there.
Oh, the sides?
Yeah.
In the
All of
back.
our houses.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All the houses have sides.
Oh, you're talking about, okay.
I'm talking about the
You're talking
back
about front to
setback.
back.
Yes.
Right, so this is mine, and that tree there, now that's gonna be building. So, I have a driveway on either side. They have a little bit of a driveway, so everybody has, and they have a little walkway. Everybody has a little bit between the sides. But, and then, again, that's my house. From here down, everybody has backyards. Over here, I'm right on the line. They're right on the line, but they're not gonna lose their view, they've got a parking lot. So I just feel something 2 feet 9 inches from my backyard.
But you own 8 and 10, that's one structure? Is that?
It is
right?
one
Right.
structure,
Okay.
it is a 2-family house.
I got it, okay.
And I'm not complaining, this side, they have a backyard, it's very nice. This one currently has a tree and a shed, but that will suddenly become a wall.
Karen, do you have an opinion on the impact on the
Yeah,
value?
so there was a house across the street from us that 2 years ago, 11 Blake, was removed. That enabled we also own a house at 1315 Blake. And that enabled us to get more light and air into that property, and I was able to raise the rents. So that's, yeah, that's the side that's gonna be impacted. The tree will be gone. And I'll be looking at a wall. And I also own over here. The red house is now gone. I own the house next to the red house. So when they moved that, I suddenly got light. I got $200 to $400 a month more. So it's my business. It's what I do, and I've been doing it for a long time. And I'm afraid that by putting something in that close to my backyard, it might impact my rental income.
I'd like to walk through just the zoning criteria for a minute. You both of us are well aware of it, but you have to find all 5 factors, and if you look at the unnecessary hardship, special circumstances, well, special circumstances in that these are small lots, but there's small lots throughout the city. I don't think that in itself is enough. It doesn't interfere with the reasonable use of the property. It's been used. It's not a unique property. It's not a unique setting. That's what the city is composed of, is small lots. There is a fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance and the setback, which is to keep open area, keep a livable city. And the variance will, as Karen testified, would injure the private rights of others. It will impact the value of their property. The next factor is relief sought. It's the minimum necessary to result in a reasonable use of the property, but the property has been used for 10 years. It's not that a property can't be used. We understand the applicant wants to expand that. We're glad his business is doing well. But from a zoning standpoint, I don't think that's sufficient. The next 2 factors, spirit of the ordinance, contrary to the public interest, as you know, the court sort of mushed those together, but one of the factors they look at is, will it grant the variance, alter the essential character of the neighborhood? That was what we saw in those pictures of a neighborhood from this point out with backyards and a livable space, which is what the master plan described as a goal of the downtown residential areas, to make it a livable space. Once you start encroaching on that setback, you change that neighborhood. The final is and a diminution in value. Again, that's the final factor, and as Karen testified, based on her experience with rental properties, putting a wall there and no space will cause a diminution in value. We understand the business reasons for the applicant wanting to expand, and we laud those. But a purpose of zoning is to create predictability. Karen and Jeff spend a lot of money on these properties, upgrading them based on existing setbacks in the zoning ordinance. This change will cause a loss in their value and in the quality of the neighborhood. And I think much as I'd like to encourage business, still have to look to the zoning ordinance and those 5 factors, and we believe the applicant has not met its burden of proof on them and request that the board deny the variance.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I do have a question. How wide is the back of your house?
How wide is the house, or how much land between?
No, how wide is the house itself?
You know, I want to say 40,
45 feet?
44, 45.
Because when I look at the diagram, really the extension is only going to encroach on about 10 feet of your house, not the whole back of your house.
Right, but it's going to be, well, you saw the picture of the porch, which I use a lot. I don't want to sit on my porch and look at a wall, or my patio and look at a wall. You know, it's like my outdoor space. I want some greenery. I enjoy that. I get so many friends and tenants that come over and like, this is the best little neighborhood right downtown. It's the closest to downtown. It's a great feel. Everybody loves living on this street. It's just, I think, going to change it dramatically, at least for me, because of that wall.
And it's going to put 3 walls in on that side of the house.
We have our house, we have the neighbor's house, we have that wall, and a driveway. You know, that's, when I bought the house 30 years ago, that was a single-family house. It always was civic zone, so I knew that, you know, it could be a lawyer's office or an architect's office, but never thought that they would be like building right up against my house. I can barely walk behind my house now. So,
Thank you.
you know, I worry about safety as well.
Do you have a terrace or patio behind your house?
Mine is on the side. I have nothing behind the house. I have like a couple feet walkway.
So yours is on the side, as we look at this photograph, it would be on the left?
Yes, that's it. So around the corner where the fence is, it angles to where it gets really narrow.
In your backyard or your building is how close to that back property line?
If you look at, I think it's picture 6, it's like,
About 2 feet.
yeah.
So your terrace is where that trailer is sitting?
No, that's just the patio, that's.
Right, it's behind that lattice. That lattice there is actually to screen me from the street, and my patio is right behind it.
I see.
And
Okay.
then that's, the property line is the stockade fence.
So you're built right up to the property line as well?
Yeah, yep. It was like that in the 1800s, apparently.
Other questions from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard in opposition?
Thank you.
Any comments from code enforcement?
Nothing specific to add. If you got any questions, I'll be happy to try to address them.
We do have some letters. We have a letter from Peter Mills, who is the manager of Woodbury Court LLC. He's writing as a direct abutter. He owns the parking lot. He indicates that Warren Street Architects are a good neighbor and rent spaces from him, and that they wholly support the project to expand. We have a letter from James S. Doramus of the YMCA, the CEO of the YMCA. Feels any improvements to the appearance of their building raises everyone's economic property values, and they support the variance request. And we have a letter here from Mark Lacombe of INX Properties. That was just a transmittal for the letter from Peter Mills.
Craig, isn't there how come they don't need a variance for maximum lot coverage? Because they must be over 80%, right?
I don't believe they're increasing the lot coverage because there's already an existing patio there.
Oh, I see. Oh, all of that counts because it's, I see.
Yeah, it's already all impervious.
Because they clearly are over 80%.
Yeah.
Would you like to offer any factual clarification in response to anything you've heard?
I would quickly. There was question about the special circumstances. The special circumstance, in addition to being obviously a tight neighborhood with significant smaller lots, is that the abutter to the south has built their improvements right to the line. I recognize it's been there for a long, long time and long before zoning. But their arguments essentially come down to, I've got mine, but you can't have yours. If you take a look at photo number 3 of their packet, you'll see that on the right side of the photo is their residential improvement. It goes right to the line. It's separated from the line by a fence. The reason that they don't have much room there is because their improvement goes right to the property line. And what we're asking for is essentially to be able to put something similar, of actually smaller mass, instead of 2.5 stories, to 2 stories. The notion that the parking area to the east of the lot provides a viewscape, well, that's only because that lot isn't improved. There's no reason that the owner of that property couldn't come along with a planning application, with or without variances, that frankly would be consistent with the neighborhood if they asked for relief, and improve that up to the height limit, and those views would be gone. And so I think it's great that they exist, and I'm happy someone's taking advantage of them, but it's only because an applicant hasn't come along. There was also testimony, conflicting testimony. On the one hand, it was stated that the proposal will affect property value. On the other hand, it was stated that it might impact rental. What I didn't see was any actual evidence provided other than testimony, which I recognize was sworn, but was nothing more than personal experience. And to my knowledge, there haven't been any tenants that have been refused to rent as a result of this particular proposal, which has been filed for a while now, waiting for hearing.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
One quick thing, if I may just add, I just want the board to understand that we did explore every other opportunity in terms of going vertically up. The building is 1.5 stories, it's balloon framed, and it sits on a rubble granite foundation. And we did have a structural engineer look at it, and to put a 3rd floor, it just wasn't a feasible option. It just, in terms of it being occupied and how we'd have to bring that all down, the only place I have to go is to the back. So it just as an FYI.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Craig, did I ask you for input?
Yes.
And you gave it to me.
I have nothing to add at this point.
Very good. We have a request to put an addition on the rear, which is to say the south side of the Warren Street Architects Building at 27 Warren Street. We heard testimony that they have no other way to add to the building, and that they need the extra space. We heard testimony from one abutter immediately to the rear that they feel that this will diminish the value of their property and their enjoyment of it. We also heard from other neighbors who were in support of the appeal. Discussion.
Am I correct that the central business district, which has no setbacks, stops at North State Street and then it becomes the CVP when it crosses over pretty close to the area in question, right?
Where is that zoning boundary?
Zoning boundaries running down the middle of North State Street here, and then along Lake Street, encompassing that building there. Then the remainder of it is the CVP, the Civic Performance District.
So, I don't know if this is a helpful comment, but just the first thing that occurs to me is when they made the zones, I mean, clearly very few of the buildings in the CVP in that area meet the setback requirements, and they were all built way before
None of them do.
zoning. So why?
No, I know what you say, yeah.
You know, why not include that in the CVP, in the central business, to sort of meet what in reality has already been happening, or create
I'm sure
a
the
sub-district that has, instead of going from 15 to 0 when you cross State Street,
And I'm sure
have
the
some
Y doesn't, right?
transitional setbacks that kind of transition in to really meet what's actually happening. I don't know if that's helpful to our
Well,
decision here. That's just
I mean, the Central Business Performance District was, or is intended to encompass the central part of the city where, you know, traditionally you have had no setbacks. You have the buildings that are built lot line to lot line with no parking. And that's one of the things with the CVP is parking is not required. So I don't know if that helps to answer that question at all, but again, when you get into the Civic Performance District, that starts to be the buffer area, the transitional area from the densely built central business performance, CVP, then you start getting into the residential high densities as it moves out from the city.
So CVP is a little bit of a mixed use between the residential and the commercial.
Correct.
And
It doesn't
everything's
have
kinda get along.
as many commercial uses as would be permitted in the Central Business Performance District, restaurants and things of that nature that have high traffic volumes and such. Actually, retail would not be permitted in the CVP either, so.
Okay. Discussion. Andrew, what do you think?
Well, I don't know exactly how to treat the fact that it's certainly not the opponent's fault. I mean, clearly with this, these houses were all built way before they were there, but it is true that not her per se, but her property creates much of the problem that she's worried about. On the other hand, they all bought their properties knowing how they were fixed and that any variance would be required.
There's a a lot of them that are up, right up to the property line, whether it's
Yeah.
front yard, or it's backyard, or it's side yard setbacks. I mean, it's consistent. And they're all pretty consistent that they're all right up against the zoning boundaries.
It's consistent in that there's basically the zone,
There's no
the
buffer.
setbacks are
Non-existing.
just very few, if any, of those properties in that block with setback, including Blake Street property behind them. But that alone can't be the hardship. I mean, that might be grounds to have city council look at it and try to carve out a different, change some of the rules of the zone. Because you can't just say, well, everybody else violates it, therefore I can too. I don't think.
In theory, you could argue that's a counter-argument, that the property's not unique
Exactly.
in that respect.
The lot coverage seems to be that it's there now, with the patio, with the shed. The difference is that it just, if they raise it 2 stories, it's gonna block the neighbor's view.
Jim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like Andrew, I'm struggling with this as well. I think that I'm not convinced that simply because everybody else is non-conforming, that they should be able to run right up to the lot line. I presume that, and maybe Craig, you can tell me, but all these structures being so close to lot lines is a legacy of pre-zoning. I don't think the zoning board has not approved anything in this district to run up to the lot lines, right?
Nothing that I'm aware of, and yeah, I mean, our current zoning came into effect starting in 1930. Prior to that, there really weren't any requirements for setbacks or buffers and fire separation or things of that nature. So.
Mm-hmm. And so when they acquired the building, they knew the rules of the road, that they'd have to come here for any sort of...
One would assume so.
An architecture firm would probably know that. So,
Oh, absolutely.
well, the good ones.
Yeah. Nick?
Well, I mean, part of me is toying with the idea that many of the properties are already on the lot line. And so does adding one more property to the lot line alter the character of the neighborhood? And I don't think it really does, not to the whole neighborhood.
I would agree. It certainly doesn't alter the character. I'm getting caught up in the diminution of the value. I think she made some good points on that. I mean, if it diminishes the value of her property, my heart wants to grant it because I think it's the highest and best use to have that area densely developed. And I think they present a really good reason for wanting to do it. It's not going to change the character, but I mean, the diminution is, even if it's of just one, I think will not diminish the value of surrounding properties. And in a way, it could improve the value of the properties in general, but what if it diminishes the value of the one right behind it? Does that...
It certainly would have a fairly dramatic effect on them.
You think so? I mean, we're only talking about impacting a part of the rear of the building. You know,
I don't know
as
if
I
it
said,
would
it's
impact
approximately 10 feet.
How does the...
I mean, is a person that's gonna rent the property, is it gonna change their mind? I mean, that they're walking down, people that are moving downtown wanna maybe walk downtown. Is that gonna change it?
I highly doubt what she's saying, that it's going to change the rent $200 to $400, but, would it tend to diminish it at all? I mean, is that the standard, if it diminishes her value at all, even if it otherwise tends to bring up values in the neighborhood by making it more dense, which is, brings more people in? Is that, I don't know the details of the standard on diminution enough to say if it diminishes her value by 1%, is that enough to where we have to deny it?
It says we're supposed to find there's no diminution in value.
There's no diminution in value of any property at all.
It's not supposed to injure anyone by reducing the value of their property. I also feel very ambivalent about it because certainly it's a dense neighborhood. It's an old building in a small lot. You can't do a thing with it without violating the setbacks. All those things are things we've found in the past to be special conditions that affect people or that have induced us to grant variances. On the other hand, I do put significant store in the fact that when people purchase a property in a certain zone and it is in certain conditions, and those conditions can't change without people getting zoning variances, they have a right to expect that they're going to stay as they are, unless something extraordinary happens. So I see two fairly close to equally balanced things going on here. And what creates it in part is that you've got what's going on Warren Street and what's going on Blake Street are two very different things. On Warren Street, we have a professional office and then a parking lot. It's much more of a commercial feel. And then there's even as you go up towards State, there's an apartment house of relatively dense use. And then on the other side are a bunch of little old 19th century houses that is more of a residential neighborhood and feel, definitely.
That's CVP, that's that.
Yeah, and
zone.
I don't know if there's any businesses on Blake Street or not, but other than the old Concord Monitor lot and the insurance company
Right, there
lot.
used to be that Concord Monitor building, and now it's probably a little bit more of a residential feel on
So
that side.
we have a conflict between the two, and I think in part the imposition of the setbacks was designed to try and mitigate that. Where you were drifting out of the downtown and into situations where you had mixed use and slightly less dense, so that it wasn't reasonable to expect that people were going to build right up, because that hadn't historically been the case. So I can see very strong arguments either way. So I make a motion to adjourn. Can't do that. No.
I think she was puffing a little bit because it's her trade and she has a strong interest in this. I mean, but I do think she made some good points about the diminution of the value, and if we had some expert opinion on it, that if there's an expert who came in, a neutral expert like an appraiser or someone to say no, that's not going to hurt her value for these reasons. But without that,
well, we didn't hear that.
We didn't hear that. So without that, I wish I could vote to approve it because I think it's a great use of the property, and I see the hardship, but I'm just having I think I'm coming down and opposed.
Would you care to make a motion?
I move to deny the variance.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to deny the variance. Is there any more discussion on the motion?
I'd only add that, now that we've zoomed back on this, I'm looking at the houses on Blake Street, and I assume the ones I'm looking at are all kind of residential, and most of them have some sort of a backyard that doesn't have a wall right up against the property line. So I'm less convinced that, it's already impacting all these other properties, and so it's not a big deal. I do think it's going to create a unique problem for the folks on Blake Street.
Yeah, but 4 of them don't have a backyard on Blake Street.
Right. But
3 do. Well,
just
maybe
an
2.
accent of what abuts them. They're not
Right.
looking
But it's not
out
their
a wall
backyard,
out the
it's
back. Yeah.
somebody else's backyard.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Say aye.
Of the motion to deny?
It was a motion to deny. It's been seconded.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Hey,
Nay. Nay. The vote is 3-2. The variance is denied. A close one. Okay, we got a lot of paper here. The next case this evening is case 3117, Daniel Martell, Team Engineering for Deborah Dearborn. The applicant wishes to remove a 20-foot square garage, which partially encroaches onto the adjacent property, and replace it with a 22.5-foot by 20... Why does that say 22.5 and then 26.5 in parentheses?
Should be,
Is that a misprint or a typo?
yeah.
Okay. Is it 22.5 that we're talking about?
26.5
Well,
width.
are there two different dimensions on the new building? I think part of the building's 26.5 and part of it's 22.5, correct?
Oh.
Yeah.
So we're talking about both 22.5 and 26.5.
And I think it's the 22.5 part that's going to be significantly encroaching, but
Okay.
I think the whole width as it attaches to the house is going to be 26.5. That's why I threw that in as parentheses, if I remember correctly.
Knocked me right out of my rut.
Well,
By 20.33 feet, two-car garage, and requests a variance to the table of dimensional regulations to permit a 4.73-foot rear setback, where a 25-foot setback is required, and a 0 setback from side property lines, where a 15-foot setback is required, for property located at 18 Rockland Avenue in an residential single-family district. Do you both swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Yes, I do.
Thank you. Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify?
I'm Deborah Dearborn, the owner of the property.
Daniel Martell with Team Engineering.
What would you like us to know?
Team Engineering proudly has represented Debbie in the design of the renovation of her property that she purchased in the spring. We're here to seek relief, as you say, from the dimensional regulations in order to reconstruct the existing non-conforming detached garage in support of the renovation of the property. The existing garage is currently non-conforming. There's currently about a 9-foot rear yard, and the north side yard actually encroaches for a negative yard, if you will, on number 16. The proposed detached garage the rear yard, the non-conformance will actually be increased, so the rear yard will be reduced to under 5 feet. The side yard non-conformance will be reduced to about 0 feet. On the whole, we feel like the reconstruction of the garage is an improvement. We're trying to match the architecture, and we're certainly trying to match the dimensions as best we can while making it a little bit more useful for Debbie, and on the whole, we feel like it improves the property. We thank you for your consideration. I do have some additional exhibits to sort of show more of the character of the renovation as a whole, but at this point, Debbie will speak to her intent for the property.
I'm new to the neighborhood. I have deep family ties here in Concord. My father grew up behind the Merrimack County Courthouse, and I have been thinking for quite a while about moving to New Hampshire. I have family who live nearby, and I have been looking for a historic, traditional type of neighborhood. And I have to say, I've purchased more than a house. I've purchased the friendliest neighbors I've ever met. And so I'm also very sensitive to the properties that are on Rockland. Rockland is a dead-end street. There are only about, I think, about 10 houses total. And the house was built in 1860, I'm told, in the sales documents. And later on, it appears that a second and first floor sleeping porch was added. So there is a little bit of a quirkiness to the house that I really like. I have no intention of changing the appearance of the house except to improve its safety. The garage really scares me. am an older person who am traveling solo, and I have grandsons who visit occasionally. So I want a safe building, and what it is now is not safe, as far as I can determine.
Which house are we, Craig?
We're number 18, this one here.
Okay.
Oops.
We found through our survey, excuse me if I could add, that so as I mentioned, it's not, it is somewhat accurate the way it's shown that the garage does encroach on number 16 currently.
Your survey says it does.
The survey does, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
As a reminder, yeah, the GIS is not a surveyed lot line. It's approximate.
Right, but this is a survey.
Correct.
Yeah.
We were optimistic about the lack of accuracy in the GIS, but unfortunately it was confirmed.
Right. Somewhere along the line, somebody goofed.
But the new garage will not encroach?
Correct.
On the,
No, I'm very keen to make sure the building is on my property, not on somebody else's.
Questions from the board? Nick? Rob?
I'm good, thank you.
Andrew? No? No questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
I don't really have anything special to add at this point, so just, all right, you have questions?
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request to add a garage, which will replace an existing garage. The new garage will be in violation of the setbacks. The existing garage is also in violation of the setbacks. In fact, it's also on someone else's property. We heard testimony that the existing garage is in poor condition and needs to come down. And I believe we heard testimony that the new garage would have to go in approximately the same location to fit on the lot. Discussion?
Well, like many cases we've heard in the past, anytime you improve on the encroachment issue by building something that's less of an encroachment, we find that that's reasonable.
Indeed.
Reasonable use, and for that reason, I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to grant the variance. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The variance is granted. Next case this evening is case 3217, Jennifer Hall. The applicant wishes to park one commercial vehicle, which is a food truck, in a location that is within the required side yard and requests a variance to the uses accessory to principal residential use, parking for one commercial vehicle, and parking for commercial vehicles, to permit the parking of a commercial vehicle in a residential district within the required 10-foot side setback for property at 6 K Street in an RN residential neighborhood district. Ms. Hall. Oh, there you are. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
I am Jennifer Hall. I am the owner of the property at 6 K Street.
What was that, I'm sorry?
The owner of the property at 6 K
Yep.
Street.
6K, yep.
Before you get started, I did notice do we have the app?
it's on the way.
When I looked through your app earlier, I did not see a photograph of the truck itself. Do you have one with you?
I have one on my phone.
Okay, I think it would be helpful if the board could see that.
Sure, absolutely.
If you email it to me, I can put it up
Okay.
on the screen.
We will do that. I currently am not in possession of it. It has, the truck carrying my truck has broken down in Pennsylvania, but it is on its way. Craig, what's your email?
C. Walker at concordnh.gov.
I think I made a mess of things here. Hold on. No, but the future files are in here. There you go.
There she is. She's a 26-foot food truck, and I have requested a variance so that I may park it in my existing driveway, which will not allow me to meet the 10-foot side setback. My driveway is 93 feet long. There's more than enough room to accommodate it without displacing any vehicles and putting it on the street, which on K Street we do have an issue with parking. We're on next week's agenda for the city council to address those issues. So the side yard setback is adjoining the property at 8 K Street. My neighbor is here to speak in favor for me. And, as I stated, there is ample parking.
Craig, if am I reading this correctly, that the issue is the setback, not the parking of the truck per se?
Correct.
You'll see the third house in, that is my house. May I approach?
Yes.
This is my house. This is my driveway. At the end of the driveway is a two-car garage. I currently have 2 vehicles. As I stated, there is more than enough room. This property here, there is a fence here along this side, approximately, I'd say 35 feet. The truck is 26.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, just to clarify here. The variance is to permit the overall parking of the commercial vehicle and within the required setback. Parking of a commercial vehicle in this neighborhood is permitted by special exception, but it must not be parked in the required side or front areas of the property. So where it does not meet that specific standard, then it becomes a variance to permit the parking of a commercial vehicle and also encroaching into the side setback.
So why would it not be required to also get the special exception if we granted the variance for
Be setback. Because in the case of a special exception, you have a specific set of criteria. If you're not meeting all of that criteria, then it jumps over into a strict variance. We have done it incorrectly in the past, but in recent reading of the law, interpretation of the law, it is proper to do it this way as a full variance because we're not able to meet the criteria for a special exception.
So the variance subsumes the special exception?
Correct.
So,
a new concept for me.
Yeah, just to make sure I understand, if she was within or outside of the setback, she would just need a special exception to park commercial vehicle.
Correct, yes.
Questions from the board? Nick?
I'll send you an article on it.
Oh, that'd be good, fascinating.
Jeff?
I assume you're just parking there, you're not
Right, just
open for
parking,
business in the
just-
neighborhood?
Correct. I'm not doing any business. I have rented a commercial kitchen, so I'm accepting no deliveries there. I will not increase any traffic flow in the neighborhood. It's strictly just to park the food truck there so that I can plug into shore power and maintain the proper cooling and freezing temperatures during off-business hours.
Would it fit in the garage?
No, it's too tall. It has a large hood vent.
Mm-hmm.
So for the fire suppression system and the vent system, it won't fit in the garage, unfortunately. There'll be no changes to any structure, simply just to park in the existing driveway as it stands right now.
Rob, any questions?
I'm good, thank you.
So you'd be parking it right up close to the garage?
I could park it there. I could park it between the houses so that none of the neighbors, other than the one neighbor on 8K Street, could see it unless you're driving in front of the house. I mean, I'm open to doing whatever I need to do to, support the neighborhood. I chose to get, actually it was proposed that I purchase a diesel engine vehicle. I said no because I didn't want a diesel engine coming and going outside into the neighborhood. To address one concern of one neighbor, I would voluntarily forfeit the rights to this variance, should I ever move from the property? Because there was a question, would it be transferable with the property? So I would voluntarily forfeit that right. So that the next property owner, if they chose to seek a variance, would have to go through this same process and hearing.
To just explain that concept, a variance is granted for the property, not the specific user of the property. And the board cannot put a condition that it expires, when the property owner moves or, is replaced. What Ms. Hall is stating is if she was to sell the property, and it would almost be more of a private covenant between her and the neighbors, that she would make an overt act of discontinuance, basically notifying our office that she is forfeiting the variance at that point in time, and anybody else wanting to come in and exercise that would have to come back to the board for a new variance. It's a little strange, it's a little different, but...
Yeah, that's another new one. We're getting into all kinds of new and exciting ground. What
Use that in the future.
what stops us from putting a condition on that if it's a different truck,
Right.
it would be a different case and we would need to see it again?
If it was a significantly different truck, somebody bringing in a full-body tractor-trailer cab with a reefer on the back of it and parking it in the driveway, a 70-foot-long truck or something, that would be a significant change. But somebody bringing in another 27-foot-long truck that was essentially the same thing, it would not be a change of circumstances and it would stay with the land.
So we could not impose that condition unless the truck, and in fact, we wouldn't need to impose that condition. It would automatically apply if a different type of truck.
It's already been a representation made to the board that you'll be basing your decision upon.
Therein ends my legal career.
Count yourself lucky.
Yeah. Other questions from the board?
Just intrigued with this voluntary forfeiture. Have you seen it exercised previously?
The expiration of a variance is based on an overt act of discontinuance. Normally, it's a situation, or the classic would be somebody has a two-family home, and they go in and open up a doorway into the other side and take out fixtures. That is an overt act of discontinuance. There's some regulations that say if something's not exercised for a period of 12 months, it expires. But the courts have said you need to have something that really shows your intention to relinquish that right. And I think if she was to voluntarily put a letter into our office stating that she no longer wishes to exercise her right to the variance, I think that would count as an overt act of abandoning that right to the variance.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if it's ever been challenged, but that's my position.
Thank you.
Is that a quick question? Different subject, but so obviously if you park it in your driveway, the side of the truck, which has the distinctive logo and coloring, is visible to you in number 8, and that's about it.
Depending on where, if I park between the houses, yes, just the two properties.
Oh, if you parked closer to the street, then it could.
You could see it from the street.
But the back of it isn't that distinctive, right? The back of it wouldn't be objectionable or noticeable to anybody.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions from the board?
Good, thank you.
Everybody good? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal? Please come forward. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Would you identify yourselves as you testify, please?
I'm Jim Spiegel.
Last name again, please?
Spiegel.
Could you spell that for me?
Sure. S-P-E-I-G-E-L.
Thank you.
And Teresa Spiegel.
And what would you like us to know?
Well, we live in the house directly across, and
You can see our
you can see our
garage.
trash right there. So-
There's our house.
There it is,
yes.
right there, yeah.
So we have a satellite photo of your trash.
I know, I know. Oh, you have to highlight it. And we are really excited about this whole thing and have no problem whatsoever with seeing this food truck.
Very good, thank you.
We like the picture.
Yeah.
I thought I saw some more hands for in favor. Please come forward.
Is this in the Heights?
Hello, my name is Helen Moquin.
Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
May we have you, would you spell your last name for me, please?
Moquin.
What would you like us to know, Ms. Moquin?
I just appear on behalf of my husband and myself in support of the variance requested by Jennifer Hall. We own the property at 4 K Street, which abuts the property owned by Miss Hall and Miss Gardner. And we've been neighbours with JJ, as friends call her, and Kathy, since they bought the house approximately 2002. Since then, they've been nothing but respectful, courteous and considerate neighbours. We see no reason why Miss Hall should not receive a variance so that she can park the food truck she recently purchased in her driveway. It would not be a hindrance to us as neighbours and will in no way detract from the character or the aesthetics of the neighbourhood. We believe the use of the driveway for parking the food truck is completely reasonable, and that preventing Miss Hall from parking the food truck there would interfere with the reasonable use of the driveway. In addition, we are completely confident that the food truck will not be used for business purposes while parked at Miss Hall's residence. We believe in the spirit and intent of our ordinance is meant to protect neighbours, such as ourselves, from unreasonable use of residential properties that are incompatible with the character of the neighbourhood and that would harm neighbours in their enjoyment of their own properties. A variance in this case would not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, because as previously stated, the use would be reasonable, compatible with the character of the neighbourhood and would do no harm to neighbouring property owners. A variance in no way would be contrary to public interest and in fact would promote the public interest by allowing Miss Hall to reasonably and economically store the food truck, which will be her primary source of income without additional cost. Given the care we know Miss Hall takes in everything she does, we have no doubt that the food truck will contribute to the economy and the social well-being of Concord. We believe it is only just that Miss Hall be able to park the food truck in her driveway so that she does not have to engage in extra expense to store a vehicle that will do no harm to the neighbours. Lastly, we have no concern that a variance will affect our property value. On the contrary, Miss Hall and Miss Gardner are such good stewards of their property that their presence in our neighbourhood only increases the value of our neighbouring properties. For all of these reasons, we heartily and unreservedly endorse Miss Hall's request for a variance and respectfully ask that you grant the request. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I saw one more hand. Please come forward. Yeah, going well. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Would you give us your name as you testify, please?
Yep. My name is Kyle Skove. My wife and I own 8K Street. That's the house that would be...
Skove?
S-K-O-V. Yep. We own the house that this is kind of all about because we're close. That's the issue of the variance. We, as a young married couple, we are solely in favorable of this. We have no objection whatsoever. And as a young married couple, it stands a testament that we didn't even have to make a conversation about this. We just knew it was a good decision for the neighborhood and for the community. Another reason that I feel this is great is being somebody who is a grad student looking for my MBA. I really love to see an entrepreneur start in Concord, and I really, really like to see the fact that it's a new type of business that we don't have right now. I think this is something that's very favorable. I don't mind the fact that I'll have to see the truck. I actually think it's a pretty intriguing thing, maybe even a good conversation starter with friends and family when we have dinners. So,
How about that food truck?
yeah, seriously. And you know
Just
what?
stay off politics and religion and you're good.
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Depends
And you
who's
know what?
catering the dinner, I think.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I was just about to put. So I think that, you know, in all things had with what our line is and how much it would show, we do have a fence that's going to block the majority of it. Really wouldn't be a problem in that fashion. She's not going to operate it. As you can see, she's quite the pillar of the community who went through every check about what she would have to do to make this happen. And I wholeheartedly believe that she's doing everything in accordance to what she needs. Along with that, I do believe that when she does give a property, she will absolutely forfeit that right to it. And I have no issue with it and believe that the covenant that would stand is a good one.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard in favor? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition? Please come forward. That's all right, we have time. Swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Diane Callahan, and yes.
Watch out for that swirling chair.
Yeah, I'm trying to. First of all, I am not opposed to the variance as it is stated. I do get very frightened by the word commercial in a residential area. I've dealt with this in another town where they were setting up a variance requirement for a situation that I had purchased into. All of a sudden, they said, no, you can't do that. And my point was, well, I bought the house as the conditions were set. And the town finally agreed that the easiest way out of this was to be sure that when the house was sold, it was stated that there was a variance that was not going to be carried forward. And that was the making it legal. So that whoever purchased the house, if they wished to do the same thing, would have to go and apply for a variance. And if this is set up so that it's all in the records, then I'm very happy to support this.
Very good, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Any comments from code enforcement?
Well, again, the board cannot place a condition on a variance that it expires or it's based on the property owner, because the variance is based on the specific conditions of the property itself, not who resides there. So,
I think we got it.
Yep.
We got it?
We got it.
We got it, we got it. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request for a variance to allow the parking of a food truck, a photograph of which we saw, into the setback. The floor plan, excuse me, the site plan indicates that the existing driveway is partially in the setback, hence the need for the variance. We also heard from code enforcement that the usual requirement for a special exception to do this in this neighborhood is subsumed by the variance request. Discussion?
Did anyone catch, maybe I should have asked this before they left, but who has the fence? Does number 6 have the fence or number?
You mean own the fence?
Yeah.
We can ask that question.
Who has the? I do. And would it largely conceal the truck?
Yes.
Does it cover the entire, up, like where the houses are? Or?
No, it's like 30 feet of that. Okay. So if she parks it to the back, it would cover the whole truck that way. It's about 6-7 feet high, so you wouldn't see very much at all.
The record will show that was Mr. Scove making those remarks. Did you have something else?
No.
Any thoughts on this, Rob?
I'm good with it. I'll make a motion to approve it.
All right. Rationale?
we've heard neighborhoods in favor of it, and I think it's a reasonable use of the property.
Second, anyone?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion is granted, or excuse me, the motion passes, the variance is granted. And the neighborhood will have something to talk about at dinner. The next case is 3317 Patrick Dugan. The applicant wishes to legitimize an existing second dwelling unit and requests the following: a variance to the table of principal uses to permit a two-family dwelling in a district where two-family dwellings are not permitted, and a variance to the provisions for duplex or two-family dwellings to permit a two-family dwelling on a lot with a 200-foot plus or minus frontage and 1.13 acres of land, where frontage of 300 feet and 3 acres of land would be required if such use was permitted. All for property located at 168 Hoyt Road at in an RO residential open space district.
I'm Betty Dugan.
You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I'm standing in for my husband, Patrick Dugan. That's his power of attorney.
Oh, very well, thank you. What would you like us to know, Ms. Dugan?
I don't know. I'm all new at this. My father bought the house for me to live in so that I would never be out in the street, because I have 6 brothers and sisters that would fight over the penny on the floor.
Oh,
so he made sure the house was left to me and Patrick.
With no pennies on the floor?
No pennies on the floor.
Okay.
And to Patrick. And I've already had my sister and them try to have me arrested for fraud that I didn't do. I mean, just, it's a family feud. But apparently when my father bought the house, there was an apartment over the garage, and somebody applied for a permit, but apparently they never followed through with it. So we don't know what to do, because we need to legalize it, because I have my daughter living in it, because I can't, my father passed away in March, and I can't afford the mortgage on my own. So my daughter has moved in to help out. There won't be anybody else living there. They have their own separate entrance and exit, their own kitchen, their own bathroom, their own living room, and it's a 1-bedroom.
Craig, why does this qualify under the in-law apartment?
Because for an accessory dwelling unit, you need to meet the minimum lot size and lot frontage requirements.
Right.
This is in an RO zone, which requires 2 acres of land and 200 feet of frontage. So it's short on the acreage, and I believe it may be short on the frontage.
The frontage is pretty long. I have a driveway that's
So it must have
from
been a
hell.
lot that was created prior to
It is.
Under the, yeah, it would have been created under the prior ordinance, I'm
Yeah,
assuming prior to 2001.
Gotcha.
Why the use variance then?
Well, again, the ADU would be a special exception, where they're unable to meet the conditions required for the special exception. We can't go that route. We have to go through a variance route.
So you hit me with that fish twice tonight.
Yeah. Well, just to try to clarify a little bit. A special exception is a use that's otherwise permitted in the zoning district, particularly if it meets the special criteria that are required for it. If it does not meet that special criteria, then it becomes a non-permitted use. So you can't allow it by special exception. It has to be allowed by variance.
But the in-law apartment, accessory use doesn't require a special exception?
Yes, it does.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
And
if-
it requires the minimum
and
lot size in front of it.
Sorry. If my daughter were to move out, I would have to rent it, because I wouldn't be able to afford the mortgage.
Okay.
The house is the only thing that my father wanted me to have.
Can you describe the physical circumstances of the house? Where's the apartment?
I have,
Show us on there.
okay. The apartment is up here. It's right above the garage. There's a breezeway here, a mudroom, and then the rest of the house is over here. A lot of it's hidden by the trees. It's pretty big. I sent you pictures of the driveway. It's a very, very long driveway.
And how long has that been an apartment?
My father owned the house over 7 years.
So it's been an apartment for 7 or 8 years?
Yeah.
Since, was it your father's, did your father convert it into an apartment?
No, it was already started. All he did was finish it. I don't know what part he finished, but I know like the bathroom and the flooring and the kitchen and all that stuff was done. I think he just put in some cabinets and not much of anything else.
Right.
Because he bought the house so that I could raise my 2 daughters on the other side of the house. I have 2 daughters who now I have 2 grandchildren. So he bought it to make sure that I'm very ill. I just got out of the hospital yesterday. And he wanted to make sure there was always a roof over my head if anything were to happen.
How old is the house? How old is the house?
Dad got it a little over 7 years ago, and it was 10 plus years then.
2000, the property, the house was built in 2001. There was a permit for, I think there's 2 permits that are pulled. One was for the breezeway addition originally, then there was a second permit for a garage. I'm not sure the dates on that. I'd have to look those up.
But no mention of
No, it was never approved as a conversion at that
No,
point.
I guess they started the paperwork, but never finished it.
But it definitely has its own entrance and its own
Yeah,
bathroom and kitchen and everything.
I don't know if you can bring it up again. There's 2 entrances. There's a door right here. Okay.
I didn't even see that.
And also through the breezeway. There's 2 doors, one into my house and one into the garage in my daughter's apartment. Yeah. So she has her own key to that side.
How did this come to the attention of the city?
Well, it's not uncommon. I believe you were trying to refinance the property.
I brought it up because when my father passed away, he messed up on the paperwork and only deeded the house to my husband. So he was on the deed. And we were having a really hard time with the mortgage companies getting it refinanced because of that apartment. So we need to refinance the house. And in order to do that, I've got to get this passed.
And that's what happens. We get a call from a mortgage company or a bank or somebody of that nature. We can't find any documentation on the legitimacy of this, and I can't find any documentation on it. So the property owner has to either remove it and bring it into compliance, generally for them to finance it, or they need to make it legal by coming before the board.
So, Kirk, so if, I heard the answer to your first question first. If this was on 3+ acres and had more than 300 feet of frontage, then they wouldn't have to come here. They'd just be able to do it under the in-law apartment provision.
Well, that's different. And for a full-fledged 2-family residence, a duplex, you need 1 1/2 times the minimum lot frontage, 1 1/2 times the minimum lot size. So that's where the 3 acres and 300 feet of frontage comes from, because this is going forward as a 2-family home. The accessory dwelling unit only requires the 200 feet of frontage and 2 acres of land. But there's several other restrictions on the accessory dwelling unit that needs to be maintained as owner occupied, and a couple of other things. So
the duplex approach is preferable
is
given their situation.
proper way to go with this. And again, as I say, you can't replace a special exception requirement when you don't meet the standards.
Other questions from the board?
Are you, in this general neighborhood, are you aware of any other properties that have like an in-law apartment or a second
I
unit?
think that the appraisers came up with some. I haven't seen the appraisal yet.
I am not aware of any offhand, but I have
Yeah.
not researched it at all either. So,
But I mean, it's been there over 7 years and nobody in the neighborhood's complained. They know it's there, even my neighbors know it's there. Almost everybody on the street knows it's there, because this past year, the ambulance has been back and forth for my father, because he was very sick. But I mean, before that, I mean, we know our neighbors and they know it's there. They know that he's lived there since he bought the house. So there hasn't been a problem up until now.
Got it. Other questions from the board?
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
I think I've muddied the waters enough at the moment.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request to grant a variance to allow a two-family unit in a building that has been treated as a two-family unit for, sounded like 7 years up to now. And we heard testimony that there is an economic hardship associated with this. Discussion?
I think that it's been converted, so they've obviously somebody put a fair amount into converting it. I'm not sure I'd approve it if it came as an original proposal, but since it's been there for 7 years, it would be a hardship to try to alter it now, and I don't think a small apartment, it is a single residence neighborhood, but I don't think one small apartment really changes the character. There's not going to be a lot of additional parking. It's unlikely it would ever be an economic rental because it's kind of designed as a family apartment. So
We don't have any neighborhood opposition here at all.
Yeah.
Again, you know.
So I'd be in favor of approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? I think a couple of things that have significance for me. One, you can't tell what's happening when you look at it.
No.
There's
I didn't even realize there was a door to the left-hand side.
and the physical circumstances, notwithstanding the question of the size of the lot and so forth, it's very similar to an accessory use, so-called in-law apartment, which is something that is allowed by special exception. I can see absolutely nobody benefiting from us failing to grant this variance, neither the city nor the neighbors.
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The variance is granted. You're all set.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Was your father retired military?
Yes, Louis Eisenhower. He was disabled veteran. Yeah, he just passed away in March.
I met him once several years ago.
Yeah,
That's why it sounded familiar.
He played at Mount Royal and then he played darts a lot.
No.
That wasn't you.
Now you're admitting to that, right?
Thank you very much.
Very nice. And,
Sorry to hear about your father.
thank you very much.
3517 Elm Grove Companies LLC for Arthur Asnev, trustee. The applicant wishes to redevelop an existing mixed-use and multifamily residential to primarily all multifamily dwellings and requests variance to the multifamily locational restrictions to permit the entire building, all stories and floors, to be used for residential uses in a district where the residential uses must be on or above the second story, and the first story is required to be used for permitted non-residential use. A variance to the maximum floor area ratio as needed to allow a floor area ratio, gross floor area for residential use divided by the gross buildable land area of 2.63 plus or minus, where a maximum FAR of 2.5 is permitted for property at 57 South State Street in a CBP Central Business Performance District. Gentlemen, do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? I do. Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify, please?
Sure, I'm Keir Harris.
And I'm Matt Menning.
Sorry, we didn't get your...
Keir, K-I-R.
Harris?
Harris. And Matt Menning, last name is M-E-N-N-I-N-G.
What would you like us to know, gentlemen?
So, the proposed variance is for using the entire building as residential and for the floor area ratio. A quick note on the floor area ratio, we had worked with Craig in the submittal. There's a discrepancy between the lot area on the GIS map versus the assessor's database. If you look at the assessor's database, we would need the variance, and if you look at the GIS map, the lot is indicated as larger, and we would not. So we were counseled to submit for the variance, but did want to bring that up, and we have some supporting documentation around the, I think you have it in your packet.
Yeah, I think we have.
You may already have this,
Yeah,
yep.
we should have that, yeah.
So I wanted to start off with that. We believe that the lot size is large enough, and get that out of the way. The reason we're applying for the variance is that we will be redeveloping the building. It's a undermanaged, underutilized, neglected building at the moment, distressed, probably less than half occupied. We will be investing significant money to renovate it, modernize it, bring in fire protection, elevator, bring it back to life. To make it financially feasible to do so, we require that use to be residential. It doesn't appear to negatively affect any of the abutters or the neighbors. There's parking available on site. There is plenty of other commercial space in the area. But probably most importantly, it was originally built as an apartment building and laid out as an apartment building, and has been somewhat awkwardly converted to some commercial space over the years. The property was built
1911.
Yeah, 1911 by the State Street Realty Company. It was erected and designed to be high-end apartments and replaced other buildings on the lot that were considered eyesores. Funny enough to find an old article about it.
Nice looking building.
Yes, yeah, it's a U shape, so the apartments on the upper floors currently, you have windows on either side, and the intent would be to just continue that through all floors as it was originally designed, and to make the project financially feasible to do so.
It had apartments on the first floor when it was first built?
Yes, the entire building.
Can you tell us what the problem is with renting to offices?
In order for us to lay out the walls, the heating, the improvements that need to occur, and the cost associated with it, the rent per square foot that we would be able to receive for commercial use would not justify that investment.
You might want to, I'm sorry, Tim, I didn't mean to interrupt, but maybe the board would be interested in understanding your full business model here for this particular use too. It might help.
Sure, yeah, that probably is relevant. So when we purchased this building recently, just last week, we also purchased at the same time 9 South State Street, which is the parking lot to the south, 19 Pleasant Street, which has a small building and a parking lot to the north, 15 to 17 Pleasant Street, known as the Star Building, and 26 to 32 Pleasant Street across the way, all of which are underutilized and distressed.
What's in that building, the 26?
26 to 32 is 100% commercial use, but has only been about 30 to 40% occupied for 10, 15 years probably.
Thank you.
Is that where the House of India is? Or?
No, it's not. It's across the street from it.
Oh, okay.
There's
Starbelly's used to be in there. There's a
The Butler Did It restaurant used to be on the first
right.
floor.
That's what I mean.
Gamil's?
Yeah, Gamil's was, I think, one of the most recent ones. There's actually.
Oh, so it is on
Diner
that
that's
side.
right.
It
I
is
thought-
on this,
26
Camille's was there.
On the north side there, 26.
Oh, I
26A.
apologize.
Yeah.
I misspoke.
The coffee shop and the.
White Mountain Coffee?
Yeah, White Mountain Coffee and the use for consignment store.
Dudley Square.
Yeah,
Thrift.
Dudley Square.
So you own on both sides of the street?
Yes. So
I see.
So what the total project plan is that 26 to 32 Pleasant, where Gamil's was, we'll be renovating that and reutilizing the rest of the commercial space that has been unutilized for many years.
As commercial space?
As commercial space. We've already started to discuss with the tenants, the commercial tenants of 5 to 7 South State about relocating just across the street into a modernized building that already has an elevator, fire protection, sprinkler system, and then returning 5 to 7 South State to its original use of residential. So really, the total project is a redevelopment of the entire corner of this block right off of Main Street.
Very good.
How many apartment units are going to be in the building?
We plan on 28, 7 per floor.
Has there been any recent use, to your knowledge, of the first floor for retail or office?
It's currently used as offices in the parts that it is occupied. Not all of it is occupied.
So that's who you're asking to relocate to do this project?
Yes.
To one of your other buildings?
Yep. And the tenants have been very receptive and actually welcoming, because this building has been, you know, marginally maintained over the years. And it doesn't have any of the modern fire protection or heating and cooling systems.
What is there, like a off the parking lot? Is that a kind of a basement level or sub?
Yeah, that's a basement level, currently being used as storage.
Used to be a coin shop in there, I think.
Or magic shop or used?
Yep. Yeah, years ago, there's a used coin shop down in the basement. I think most recently there was a music store down there, instrument and such like that.
Yeah, goes back a ways, though.
Not that it matters to what's before us, but what are your plans for that billboard?
That's all redone.
It was recently Spears Jewelers, and the prior owner and Spears terminated that agreement. We would likely use it to advertise the new development to go forward with, and after that, not quite sure. We either would rent it to somebody else or potentially remove it. It needs to have something on it if it's going to look halfway decent.
Yeah. It's one of those things. You better get it declared a historic monument, because you'd never get a variance for it.
Yeah. So, I know your time's short, but I was to tell a funny story about that building that I heard. It's apparently there was a building that occupied the entire corner, and a attorney had leased that portion of the building, and the owner wanted to tear it down, and the attorney fought with his lease and didn't give up his space, so he tore the rest of the building down and left just the little corner right there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
That's a neat building right there.
Yeah.
What's left of it?
Yeah, what's left of it.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
If it is important, I can describe the parking situation that we'll be lining up. If it's not, I can...
As long as it's not part of the variance, it doesn't matter.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, our belief is that this will bring significant economic activity, more residents downtown to make use of the shops, retail, restaurants that have been existing for a long time and also recently sprung up. Our belief is that it'll be nothing but a benefit to the area and the city of Concord.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Is there anyone to testify in favor or in opposition? Any comments from code enforcement?
No, just clarifying on that, floor area ratio. That's just, ensuring that a problem doesn't arise in the future, and there is a discrepancy there between the various records. And since there has not been a official survey done, we can't verify one way or the other. So that's there to make sure we have belts and suspenders in this case.
With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We request to convert some office space on the first floor to apartments. We've heard testimony that they are not financially feasible as office space due to the existing conditions in the building and the existing conditions in the market. Discussion?
Well, we also heard that when the building was originally built, it was all apartments at one point in time.
It seems like there's been some awkward attempts to put offices in there, but it probably doesn't, it's not a very efficient use, and it would be quite expensive and burdensome to try to make it offices when it doesn't really improve the neighborhood at all to do that.
Yeah, I think it's significant that it was built as an apartment building, and the reason why I think that is because I believe that the intent of the ordinance here was to create a street front of retail and commercial uses in this zone. And this doesn't look like a retail or commercial use on the first floor. It looks like an apartment building.
Right, there's no separation at all, there's no change.
Yeah, and so certainly if we're talking about its impact on the fabric of the community, it's zip. my opinion. And it's also a close cousin to a case we heard last month where we did grant a variance.
Right, the Manchester Street.
Yeah, because the market simply would not support what the ordinance called for.
Yeah, and the tannery site, yeah.
Would anyone care to make a motion, or is there further discussion?
I move to approve both of the variances.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The variance is granted. That moves us to the last case this evening, which is a special exception rather than a variance, so the different criteria apply. The applicant requests a special exception to allow a caretaker's dwelling in a mixed-use multi-tenant commercial building as permitted under Article 2824K, dwelling unit for resident caretaker or security personnel, and in compliance with supplemental standards for property located at 134 Hall Street in an IN industrial district. Thank you.
Let me just see what we have here. Only 3 copies.
Yeah, that's
May I swear you in, Mr. Martin?
Sir.
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you identify yourself for the record as you testify, please?
If I may, like Mrs. Moquin, I'd like to read my presentation, which I've given you and your clerk a copy of.
That's quite all right.
My accent won't be quite as cute as hers was, however.
No, your brogue is not as broad as hers, but...
Certainly not. My name is Lee Martin. I reside at 124 Hall Street, Concord, New Hampshire, in the Concord Business Center. I am here representing my family as trustee of the Levy Martin Trust of 2001, the owner of the Concord Business Center and the property located at 134 Hall Street, Concord, New Hampshire, the subject property of this hearing, 3417. The Concord zoning bylaw table of uses, Article 2824K, use B5, a copy is attached. Accessory to a principal non-residential use, B5 lists dwelling unit for residential caretaker or security personnel is allowed under the special exception SE granted, excuse me, by the adjustment. That special exception is what I'm requesting from you tonight. The history of this bylaw section starts with me approaching the city planner in 1984 to allow caretaker security apartments in the new zoning, which was passed in 1977, district on Hall Street. It was apparent to me as Hall Street developed, there would be many thousands of square feet of valuable new real estate developed and no one living there watch out for it at night or on weekends. He agreed, the planning board agreed, and subsequently the city council added it to the zoning bylaw. There was an apartment approved under this bylaw located at 134 Unit B. It was taken over for office space for an expanding business more than 2 years ago, and so we are here to request a new permit in this new addition. Under supplemental standards of the zoning bylaw, section 28535, page 530, copy attached, dwelling unit for a special caretaker may be approved as long as 3 standards are met. A, the floor area of the non-residential use shall have a greater floor area than the residential floor area. In this case, the residential area is approximately 2,500 square feet. There's a typo there. And the non-residential floor area will be approximately 64,650 square feet. B, the residence will be 1 bedroom with separate egress, 1-hour fire rating, demising walls and ceiling separations as required by zoning and all applicable building code requirements. The dwelling will share no interior common space with any non-residential use. As required by this section, the 2 most adjacent parking spaces to the dwelling entrance will be reserved exclusively for the dwelling. Green space yard area comprises approximately 95,690 square feet shared with non-residential users. The bylaw requires a minimum of 300 square feet. Mr. Chairman and members, I thank you for your time and consideration of this request. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I have served on ZBAs myself, and I want to thank you for your time and effort that you put in on behalf of all of us residents. the Warren Street case tonight had a lot of equity on both sides, and I didn't envy you that judgment.
Oh, well, you're entirely welcome. We earn big money doing this, and we...
Yes, I know.
And we're grateful for the opportunity. Questions from the board? Nick, any questions? Jim?
Lee, can you just orient me which building we're talking about on the picture?
Sure. I didn't file this, so I'm not exactly sure what was filed by my surveyor, and he had to be out of town tonight. But I'll show you in the picture, and then that shows you the new addition.
So the addition is the polygon that's yellow?
Yes. Yes, yeah, at the right-hand edge. So 134 Hall Street is right here. It was started, we built the first section of it in 1980. 20,000 feet here, then we did 20,000 feet, and then we did 10,000 feet, so we're at 50,000. There was a little house here that burned down a number of years ago, and I bought that in 2004, and it was time to finish the completion. Also, after starting in 1984 through 88, we built the Concord Business Center next door, which consists of 4 buildings. And I wanted to complete the streetscape. And so the front design here, facade, is going to replicate 130 and 124, as well as the back buildings, 126 and 128. So that's the site.
And the apartment goes in the sharp corner there? Where in the plan does it go?
You see where the balcony is on the first page of the plan that's before you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Here's a blow-up of just the site plan that we went through to do the addition. Here's the existing building, new addition. So we did. Inside this pink line.
Yeah, so this is the whole addition.
Apartment unit, it's on the second floor. It's built on 4 inches of concrete. It's hour separation both below it from the commercial space below, as well as all side walls. It has its own direct entry here, so those are the 2 parking spaces.
Very good.
So you don't need any variances for the addition itself?
Special exception only.
Just for the caretaker unit?
Yes.
Okay.
So the caretaker would be for all the property that's all like owned by you, sir?
I own them all. As I told you, I live in 124 Hall Street.
Okay.
If we can have that, well, right here, there is a caretaker apartment here. You can have a caretaker apartment in this district in any building that's 20,000 square feet or more per ownership, per lot. And this is a different lot, as you can see from this one. So from right here, and it was developed here because it watches the entrance, and it looks all the way down between the buildings. You'll see that the addition here comes 10 feet further south so that we could have a window here looking down the length of this building, and it also looks over this entrance. We also have electronic security.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members.
The record will show that there's no one here to testify in support or in opposition. Any comments from code enforcement?
Well, in this particular case, they meet all the supplemental standard conditions, so it is able to go forward as a special exception.
What a relief. Discussion or a motion?
I'm just looking at the criteria for special exception. I don't think there's any point in going through all of them because there's quite a number, but they seem to meet all of them easily. I don't see any. They seem to be entitled to the special exception, so I would I would vote for approval.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion on the motion? Excuse me. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The special exception is granted.
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Any other business to come before us tonight, Craig? Minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from the second meeting?
Is that September 13th, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second the minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
The only other thing I'd add, and we haven't had a discussion on this yet, but I should make you aware the city
has put out an RFP.
To replace the zoning board? To replace the zoning board?
No, for consultants actually to rewrite the zoning ordinance. The last full rewrite was done in 2001.
Yeah.
This time around, they're looking to tailor it more towards a form-based type code as opposed to our use-based type code now. And there's a lot of subtle differences and a lot of complicated differences, but you know, with the form-based code, you're looking more at the built environment. You might not have specific retail or commercial categories of retail, office, or something like that. You might just have a general commercial category, but the type of building, the design of the building, the build-out of the building is going to be more specific to meet the criteria of the neighborhood and the location. So we've just gotten the responses from the RFP. The next step is going to be interviewing some of the consultant firms. So this is, it's spelled out over a 2-year period of time for the deliverables to be brought in. So.
Does the city council have a plan for all this as far as a procedure?
Yeah, again, it's all been laid out as, you know, how long it's going to take. They budgeted, I believe, $200,000 thereabouts, 196 maybe, for the yeah. For the consultant process, and Heather Shank, our planning director, is overseeing this process.
Yeah, it's the question has come up at EDAC too, and it's an interest. The first I heard about this idea was maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe as much as 10 years ago, when there was some discussion. There was a workshop in Portsmouth about form-based zoning. Jeff Taylor, I think, ran that. And it's an intriguing idea. What I look forward to is how form-based zoning deals with change, as opposed to creating a situation where you would wind up with a fossilized type of construction or type of building in a given neighborhood, even though the world was marching on. That, obviously, the current ordinance has to address that too, because it does limit sizes and it does limit density and it does limit some things like that. But
well, as part of the process, the firms being, or part of the RFP, is that there will be considerable community outreach, introduction of the process, of the concept, opportunities for people who are involved to give a lot of feedback and learn, because it will be a slightly different character than we're used to today. So,
interesting.
I'm educating myself on it as this process moves forward. So
I know Heather is a partisan of the approach.
Yeah, I think she has previous experience in some of the communities she's worked in. So
I'm surprised I haven't seen anything about that in the monitor. I'm surprised there hasn't been any reporting on that.
Yeah, I mean, went through. Yeah, I mean,
it's the first I've heard of it actually is tonight.
Yeah, so it's out there. That's why I wanted to.
Well, thanks for. There'll be some public input. They'll be looking for.
Oh yeah,
though.
yeah. That's all part of the.
It'll be a food fight.
Oh boy, we'll bring the truck.
Threats envisioning and such. So.
That'll calm everyone down.
I'll bring the truck.
It's hard to be mad when that truck's around.
Yeah.